This is some raw chicken carcasses that I got from a local organic farm. Got a back and the breast in there, but it's all, most of the meat's been cut off, and so it's got a little bit of meat on there, some bones, and I got a neck and 2 chicken feet. Add some peppercorns. Add a little bit of salt. Actually, that's a lot of salt, but I'm going to cover it with a lot of water. I like to add a bay leaf. I find that it makes it taste just a little bit better. And you don't have to, but sometimes I like to put a little bit of seasoning. So I sprinkled that on. I can season this broth later, but right now I just wanted to add a little bit in there to be cooking. I find it smells a little better to me when it's cooking, when it has some spices in there. Okay, I've covered the chicken carcass with filtered water, and I will put a lid on this, set it on the stove, and bring it to a boil. Now, I don't want to forget about this. I want to watch it a little bit, because when it starts to boil, it's probably going to foam over. It gets kind of like a foam that starts to bubble in there, and then it'll just spill over and make a big mess. So I want to keep an eye on it, and when it's just ready to boil, I will turn this down to low so that it can simmer. That's that scum I was talking about, that foamy stuff. Some people like to scrape it off. I don't worry too much about it in this case, because I use free-range organic chicken and stuff, so I'm not worried too much about what's in there. And I also use filtered water. So anyway, I turned it down. It was on high, and now I've turned it down. I'm going to turn it to medium first, because sometimes if you turn it down or to low right away, it doesn't maintain the boil. So I want it to maintain a boil. So I'm going to put it on medium just for a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it down to low, and we will simmer that for about 2 hours or so. I'll check it in. You want to definitely check it now and again so that you can add more water if the water gets below the level of the chicken. Very important. Add more water, and when you add more water, you might have to turn it up a little bit to boil it again, depending on how much water you have to add. Okay, sometimes if it's boiling and you have to walk away from it for a second, you can do something where you put the utensil on there, and then you can put the lid like that, and that just props it up so that it can continue to boil, but not boil over while you walk away. But in this case, this chicken, it's not hot enough to boil it over anymore, so I'm just going to take it out, and I'm just going to simmer it like that. Okay, it's been actually 3 hours since it's been simmering, and I think I can strain it now. Actually, I have to, because supper is going to be pretty quick in about an hour, so I want to get the vegetables in here and stuff. So, but first I have to strain off the broth, so I'll show you how I do that. Okay, so this is the setup I'm going to use for straining off the broth. So I have a nice big glass pitcher here, and then I've got a nice strainer that the handle actually fell off, so it fits really nice in there. And I'm going to put this in the sink, actually, because if I spill, then the mess will be in the sink and not on my cupboard. And I'm going to pour basically whatever's in the pot. I'm going to pour it into here, and I'll stop if it gets too full, and then I'll make it in 2 steps probably. But and then whatever I collect, I will put aside, and I'll be picking off the meat later. So I will go ahead and strain it and get back to you. Okay, here's the remaining chicken carcass with the meat and skin and everything still on it. I'm going to let that cool, and then I'll pick the meat off, and I'll be adding some of that meat, or most of that meat, back to the stock. This glass pitcher is only 8 cups, so when I was straining off the stock, I had to use 2 containers. So this is a glass pot that I had, and then this is 2 jars. These are both 500 milliliters, so I have a liter of stock that I'll put in the fridge. Note, when I'm pouring off the broth, it's a good idea to wear some oven mitts, because that broth is very, very hot and you can get burned by the steam. So just wanted to add that in. Before I put this stock back into the stainless steel pot, I am going to chop up an onion and simmer that, or saute that in a little bit of fat in the bottom of the stainless steel pot, because onions tend to taste a little better when you do cook them a little bit first. So I'll show you what I'm doing. Okay, I thought I needed to show you how to cut an onion, just in case somebody didn't know. So basically, I'm going to show you 100 ways to cut onions, and I'm probably not doing it right. But anyway, I cut the end off here. Cut the end off here. Save that, because I might be able to use that in stock for later. And then on the flat side, I'll turn it over upside down. Keep your fingers out of the way, cut it in half, and then I'll cut it in quarters again because it's just easier to peel that way. And sometimes you get some onions and they're not, the first layer isn't so great, so I just peel it down to the first good layer. And again, I'm just going to set that aside and go through it later and pick off the good stuff that I could use for stock possibly. And what I mean for that is I'll put it into a freezer bag in the freezer and I will use it later to throw a bunch of stuff together to make a vegetable stock. So inside an onion you've got a little bit of a core, so that's how I get it off. I just chop it like that and chop it like that. Some people like to keep that all attached so that when they're dicing it nice and neat it all sticks together and they can get all uniform. I don't care. I'm just making soup. So sometimes I put them together like this and keep my fingers out of the way. I kind of just do some thick chopping. Cut there, and then when it gets to about here, it gets a little unstable, so I flip it on its side and I just do a little bit of chop in there. And I try to keep my fingers out of the way. I'm actually being a lot more careful right now because I don't want you to learn my bad habits. Anyway, there's my chopped onions. I'm just going to put that into the stainless steel pot that I have that has some oil warming up, and I'll saute that a little bit. Okay, here's my stainless steel pot that's been cleaned out, and I had heated some oil in there. Actually, it's bacon fat. I like bacon fat. I know it's chicken and bacon fat, but bacon fat goes with everything. So I have the burner on medium, and I'm just gonna saute these for a couple minutes maybe till they start to get a little clear. Okay, the onions are sauteing. I've cleaned up, I've taken off the junk pieces from the ends of the onions, the stuff I wouldn't want to put in a soup stock. And now I'll just stick that in my little freezer bag that will go back into the freezer after I'm done. These ones I already trimmed. The celery I have trimmed off already when I put it in the fridge because I was making soup stock the other day, so I don't have to trim any of that. It's already been washed. I'm going to cut the ends off the carrots. Why not? Stick them in the bag for soup later. And for carrots, they take a lot longer to cook than some of the other vegetables. So again, I'm just doing a rough chop, and I'll try to use good chopping techniques so that I'm setting a good example. And do that again. Basically cut the ends off. You can hear the onions sizzling in the background. I do have a timer on so that I don't forget about them because I don't want them to burn. So I've set it for a minute or so, but I'm just going to quickly check that. You're still doing okay, just give it a quick stir. A rough chop of the carrots, and I know through the old cutting board that's flying around, I'm sure it's dangerous, but I'm too cheap to get another one. Inside works great. Chop the end off, save that for soup stock later. Cut the carrot in half and then cut it in quarters, and then rough chop. I'm going to add these carrots to the sauteing onions. And now I'm going to chop the celery up. So I have to slice it down the middle. And if it's a big piece, I might slice it again. Again, I'm keeping my fingers out of the way. Okay, and then do a chop here. Add this. Okay, here's my soup pot with the sauteed onions and celery and carrots. The onions were turning clear before I added the celery and the carrots. I'm going to add a few little spices like salt and stuff like that, but I'm going to add the broth to it right now as well. Okay, I added the broth back into the pot, and that's just cooking on, I think I got it on medium. And I'm going to bring it to a simmer again and then turn it down a little bit. Meanwhile, I have washed some mushrooms. I had some mushrooms in the fridge and I thought, oh, that would taste pretty good in soup. Always wash your mushrooms. Don't just rub them. You really want to wash them. They are grown in manure. All right. Okay, I'm going to put this to the pot. This is my broth with carrots, celery, onions, and mushrooms in there. One point about the mushrooms, when I said always wash your mushrooms, don't use soap because the mushrooms will taste like soap. Just use running water, wash them, rub them, just do your best. This is the meat that I pulled off of the bones. It's probably about 1.5 cups, I think. And I think when I add this to the soup, it will be just enough. I don't think I need to add anything else, but we'll have a look. Okay, here's the soup. I added the chicken meat to it, and I made sure that there weren't big chunks. And I'm just giving it a stir, and I think it's going to be okay. I'm going to put the lid on it. I'm going to turn it up a little bit and get it simmering again. I'm going to add a few more spices, give it a taste test, see if I need to add any more, and then let it simmer until it's ready to eat. Okay, so here is the soup, nice and cooked. I seasoned it with some salt, tasted the broth, it's all good. So I think it's going to be a hit.